Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 8 Matchups Edition. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to break down every single matchup ahead of what should be an ever-electric Week 8 slate of action. Of course, I cannot accomplish all this alone. Accordingly, I'm joined by the one, the only, Kendall Valenzuela is in the house. What's up, K-Dog?
Hey, Ian. Well, I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to break down these games. It should be a good week, aside from the Mageddon, which I hope people plan for. But we've got some good stuff to talk about, so I'm doing well.
Unfortunately, a little bit of heartbreak in the Venezuela
Ah,
household going on. Sorry.
God. I know.
Sorry,
It's
K-Dog.
okay. That's all right. It's not like we let sports dictate our whole lives. So everything's going to be fine. Go Mariners.
I sent it yet, but I was just tilting because I lost like my home league fantasy league by like point 0.2 on Monday. And I just saw the draft on Tuesday morning where it was like fantasy football doesn't decide my happiness, but it certainly helps,
Yeah, no kidding.
That's
No kidding.
baseball, all this jazz. Again, put that aside for a minute because we are focusing on all things week 8 here. First, though, as always, it's time for our DraftKings opening lines. We got teams back at practice on Wednesday, which means there are plenty of injury updates to get to, especially at the quarterback position, where we could see 9 different backups actively starting this week, but maybe we'll see some of the starters get healthy enough. Starting off with Michael Penix, who was limited in practice with this lower leg foot injury. He did say he expects to play in week 8. Hopefully the same is true, Kendall, for Lamar Jackson. Was seen at practice, officially limited with that hamstring injury. Look, it's one of those things where, look, Kendall, as someone who has spent, the better portion of the last 10 years, I would say, making bets and then losing said bets. I do think there's some credence to the idea that Vegas knows more than us about these sort of things. And the fact that the Ravens throughout this whole week have still been listed as 6.5-point favorites kind of makes me think that they're confident Lamar is going to play. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I feel the same way. Today was really important though. Like Adam and I always talk about like Wednesday practice reports are important, but then it's the Thursday, Fridays. But if you're on the wrong side of it starting on Wednesday, you get a little bit nervous. So I don't know, Ian, they took out, did you read that report? They took out the ping pong tables. They've got no more Papa Shot in the locker room. Like they're ready to officially lock in. And so that means Lamar Jackson's locking in. So I'm with you. You know, if we were to bet on it, I would bet that he is good to go because the lines haven't really moved in any other direction besides towards the Ravens in this game. So you're happy to see him today. Tomorrow's going to be equally as important. And then Friday is going to be the most important to make sure he's not limited and did log a full practice.
For the record, the ping pong table removal, veteran player decision, Kendall. Okay.
Oh,
Player's
okay.
choice here. No coaches getting in on the locker room action. So just really important, antidote there. Also note Tyrod Taylor with a knee issue is actually limited and considered day to day. Head coach Aaron Glenn is not going to name a starter to the media because he wants to maintain that competitive advantage. I thought I could say it with a straight face. I'm sorry, guys. Brock Purdy also limited with a toe injury. Bryce Young not practicing with an ankle. He was seen out there early without a boot on, so a little bit better than maybe we were thinking. Still tentatively expecting Andy Dalton to start, though. And then finally, Jaden Daniels is out for Monday Night Football with a hamstring injury. Still not considered a long-term issue, but it will be Marcus Mariota against the Chiefs. More on him in a little bit. Over at running back, we have Chargers RB Hassan Haskins ruled out ahead of Thursday Night Football, which means a workhorse role could be incoming for Kimani Vidal. We'll touch out on more on that here once we get into game-by-game previews. Joe Alt should be back, though, for the Chargers. Great news for their offensive line. On the other sideline for that game, we have Aaron Jones questionable with a hamstring injury. So is left tackle Christian Darrisaw with a knee issue. So keep an eye on those ahead of Thursday night. Breece Hall is limited with a knee issue as well, considered day-to-day. DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson are not practicing, and Bucky Irving is out this week, and the Buccaneers have a week 9 bye as well. So hopefully he's ready to go in week 10. The Bears one is interesting, Kendall, because again, Swift and Roshan being banged up. I'm not overly worried because again, we saw Swift have this issue in practice last week. Didn't seem to really limit him on Sunday when he was playing. Probably just kind of getting the day off. But hey, a good reminder that Kyle Manung guy probably out there on the waiver wire. Not a bad guy to add.
Yeah, he's definitely someone, and this is why it's so important. Like we preach it all the time, but it's so important to get those backups and to get the handcuffs for your guys. Kyle Monangai has been on the up and up, but especially with what we saw last week with him, he's not someone that until we hear about DeAndre Swift, you want to necessarily start right away. But it's trending in the right direction, and we've said before, it's not the exact 1A 1B situation with Ben Johnson and the Lions. This is not David Montgomery. This is not Jahmyr Gibbs, but we've seen how he utilized them before in that offense. So that's what the hope is at the end of the day here for this team and the Bears running backs. But and DeAndre Swift has been banged up before this season, so just get Kyle Monangai on your rosters just for the off chance that he is unable to go. Maybe not even this week, but we never want injuries. But if he goes down, Kyle Monangai would have a huge role in this offense. So go and get him. He should be out there.
In wide receiver news, the following wide receivers were not practicing on Wednesday to start the week: Nico Collins and Christian Kirk for the Texans, Garrett Wilson, Ricky Pearsall, Calvin Ridley, Josh Palmer, as well as Chris Olave and DJ Moore. Out of that group, I am most confident in Olave and DJ Moore still continuing to play. We did hear from Nick Underhill that Olave is indeed expecting to play. And then for DJ Moore, again, I believe this is the same issue that was already impacting him last week, wound up playing through it just fine. Also, we do have Josh Downs progressing through the concussion protocol. He was limited in practice. Christian Watson plans to play this week with a knee injury. We'll break down those Packers wide receivers more in a bit. The Giants signed Ray McLeod to their practice squad because Brian Daboll won't stop signing undersized slot receivers. And also Mike Evans to IR, set for surgery this week. Kendall, he's got an 8-week or fewer timeline per rap sheet. It was apparently a clean break on the collarbone. Maybe week 16, maybe week 17. Fireworks for the fantasy championship. How cool would that be?
That would be, first of all, it would be amazing. I'm going to be skeptical about it because that's just who I want to be as a fantasy manager going into those weeks. But it would be good. They told us that's why they didn't say that it was going to be a season-ending injury. They had the idea, the Buccaneers did, that Mike Evans would hopefully come back to help them with a playoff push. And I thought it was going to be a little bit later, like looking maybe at week 18 for them and going into January. But I think he obviously meant our fantasy playoff push, Ian, which is far more important than their fantasy playoff push. So if we can get Mike Evans back by then, that would be amazing.
And as always, if you're able to stash Mike Evans in your IR spot, that's ideal. I understand if you have a short bench, I wouldn't say he is a must stash, again, just given the fact that we're hopeful for only 1 or 2 games max. I don't know about you though, Kendall, but if I am in a league where I have 3 or 4 IR spots, I love leaving, the James Connors, the Joe Burrows on the board there, just because, not because it's actually going to help me down the road, but I want people when they look at my crappy fantasy team to scroll down and be like, oh, well, look at all those guys he had hurt in IR. That helps explain things a little bit. So
no, it makes it
super,
better.
sharp. Yeah, super sharp, fantasy intel right there, of course. On to, also, by the way, Chris Godwin out this week with a fibula issue like Bucky. Hopefully he's ready to go after the bye. Who knows, though, at this point. At tight end, Darren Waller to IR with that pec injury. Greg Dulcich is up. David Njoku is back at practice with that knee issue. Kevin Stefanski is hopeful he'll play, considered day-to-day for now. Cole Kmet not practicing with a back injury could maybe be the final bump that we're looking for Colston Loveland. And finally, Dalton Kincaid limited with an oblique injury. Relatively good sign coming off the bye. But then again, he was practicing in a limited fashion before the bye, still wound up not suiting up for that game against the Falcons. So, guys, with that said, let's get into matchups. This has been our DraftKings opening lines. Big games, big moments, and even bigger upside this week. I have teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6 to give you a new way to get in on the action. With Pick 6, you ride the upside by making simple predictions. Will a player score more or less than the number listed? You put your picks together, and the more you hit, the bigger your payout. And right now, guys, there is an incredible offer. New DraftKings Pick 6 customers play $5 or more on your first pick set and get $50 back in bonus picks. That's right. New customers play $5 or more on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus picks instantly. So don't miss your shot to ride the upside. Download DraftKings Pick 6. Get on all the action and sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. Thanks to DraftKings Pick 6 for sponsoring this. Let's make this season one to remember. Kicking things off with Thursday Night Football here on the Fantasy Live Show. We got the Vikings traveling to Los Angeles to take on the Los Angeles Superchargers. Chargers are favored by 3 points. Game total resting here at 44.5. Kendall, looking at, again, the home squad Chargers. We'll see. Every now and then we do see their stadium get taken over by some of those road fans. But wanted to take a look at this backfield because, again, with Hassan Haskins out, certainly seems like Kimani Vidal is being set up for a pretty big workload.
Yeah, I like Vidal in this spot here. People might look at the week 7 box score, right, Ian, and they might say, yuck, why would I even do that again? 7.5 fantasy points. But I think the clear thing here is that, and Hassan Haskins being doubtful, not going to be able to go in this game. Like, you look at this and he wasn't necessarily eating into that workload, but it does clear an even bigger runway for Vidal. So he had 65% of the snap share and 69% rush share. And then you kind of see that the Vikings, surprisingly, allowing the 9th most running back rush yards per game, sitting at 102.2. So I'm looking back and I'm saying, the game last week was against the Indianapolis Colts, who rank 6th in the NFL in fewest rushing yards allowed per game. So I think Vidal has a way better opponent this week going up against Minnesota. Again, a clearer runway where you can at least say to yourself, this feels a lot better to start him. But like I said, 7.5 fantasy points last week wasn't necessarily amazing, but I do like this matchup. Again, they're at home. They were at home last week as well. So they've been getting, being able to stay home. They get no Hassan Haskins in this one. So I feel like they're going to have to lean on Vidal just a little bit more here.
Consensus RB24 in our ranks. Imagine he'll be in far more fantasy lineups, so not due to all these teams on bye. Looking at the Vikings, guys, Jordan Addison putting up some big numbers this year. In fact, he is the wide receiver 6 in PPR points per game right now. The only guys outscoring him, Puka Nacua, JSN, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and George Pickens. Just a bunch of scrubs up there with Mr. Jordan Addison. But honestly, again, this is a guy, one of only 5 wide receivers with 20-plus receiving touchdowns in 2023 and 2024. We know how good he can be. It's just been more so the questions with the quarterback room. But hey, another week of Carson Wentz under center with JJ McCarthy out. And with Wentz under center, guys, we've actually seen the Vikings be the 4th most pass-happy offense in the NFL. They were the 2nd most run-heavy offense in the NFL with McCarthy. So small samples, I get it, but goes to show you that KOC certainly does seem to trust Wentz under center, which should make us trust Jordan Addison at least for another week as a rock solid, wide receiver 2 at this point. He is coming in as our consensus wide receiver 23. That is ahead of guys like Xavier Worthy, Romeo Dobbs, Khalil Shakur, and DJ Moore. Still behind the Chargers wide receivers, Tedero McMillan, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith. But Jordan Addison, great start to the season. We'll see if he can keep on keeping on. Keeping on here on the Fantasy Life Show, Kendall. We got the Bears traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. As I mentioned before, Vegas not seemingly scared off of the Lamar Jackson injury worry. Accordingly, Baltimore is sitting pretty as 6.5-point favorites with a week high 50.5-point game total. So looking at those Ravens, Kendall, again, we all want Lamar Jackson to be out there. I will say, God forbid we do have to watch Cooper Rush and Tyler Huntley try to pretend like they know how to play football. I would still be feeling pretty good about Derrick Henry in this spot.
Yeah, Derrick Henry's the one where, and hopefully we get Lamar back, because what are we doing? We can't continue. They need to win, Ian. That's the other part of it. Like, ping pong table jokes aside, like, this team knows that they're in a really tough spot. It's kind of like how we talked about the Cincinnati Bengals last season. They have to go on this run or else they are going to miss the playoffs. And I can't believe that we are even talking about the Ravens like that at this point. But like you said, the odds are in their favor. Like, literally the odds have not changed for this game. So it feels like we're going to get Lamar Jackson here. They're the second favorites to win their division. So we know it's going to come down to a close race, but they need everyone to be their best, to be at their best. That starts with Lamar Jackson, and it also starts with Derrick Henry. So I don't think a lot of people need us to tell them that you're starting Derrick Henry this week, but it's looking at the Bears defense, and they've actually been all right since their week 5 bye going up against these running backs. But again, to me, Ian, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, all right, I believe Derrick Henry is going to get at least 1 touchdown in this game because they just absolutely need him to get going. And even though the Bears have improved, so they've improved to 7th in schedule adjusted run defense, but they are giving up the 3rd most yards per attempt and the 7th most rushing yards over expected per attempt, according to Next Gen Stats. So I look at that and I say to myself, this team is rested. They're hungry. They're going to be angry because they're in this position where they only have 1 win going into week 8. So to me, I'm looking at them and saying, I like them not only here, but probably the rest of the way. I just have this stat that says Baltimore's next 5 opponents have a combined record of 10-23 at this moment. So if the Ravens continue to just make mistakes during these games, they're going to lose. And then at that point, we're going to sit back and say, wow, this is a Ravens team that's not going to compete in the playoffs, or it's going to be coming down to a really close matchup. But I think they need Lamar Jackson, obviously. They need Derrick Henry to step up. So I'm putting him down for at least 1 touchdown in this game, and you're starting him everywhere if you can.
Couldn't agree more. The schedule coming up is a mixture of really bad opponents, like you mentioned, or just soft run defenses that we do expect the Ravens to be able to take advantage of. Last week on this very show, we actually mentioned Derrick Henry and T. Higgins being 2 pretty prime buy low candidates right now, and I'm not shying away from that at all for King Henry. Looking at Yahoo, some actual trades that have gone down today, Kendall. 2 for 1s to go ahead and get Derrick Henry. I like the Henry side of all these. Nice. Chris Olave and Breece Hall. There's also Alvin Kamara and Jackson Dart, Stephon Diggs and Chuba Hubbard, and then even just, Derrick Henry straight up for like someone like Saquon Barkley. David Montgomery and Ricky Pearsall is another one. Again, I'm taking the Derrick Henry side in all those. Maybe not in your guys' leagues, but hey, as Kendall told us on Monday, worst case scenario, you get made fun of in the group chat. Best case scenario, your league partner is getting made fun of for giving you Derrick freaking Henry. So I like that call. I want to talk about this Bears offense and just kind of take like a status check of the Ben Johnson kind of effect, if you will, after these first 7 weeks. On the one hand, they actually lead the NFL in terms of big plays per game. Those are defined as 15 plus yard completions or 10 plus yard runs. So we are seeing some explosive ability. And the run game, guys, has taken a huge step forward since the bye. Okay, so small 2-game sample, I get it. But the Bears are actually 31st in terms of EPA per rush before their bye. Second best rushing offense in the league, though, over these past 2 weeks. The problem is just that we haven't seen the same progression out of the passing game. So we have Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Colson Love, and like the talent should be there. Luther Burden's been flashing all over the place, but the easy just hasn't been easy in Chicago. And I wanted to go ahead and look at, okay, what happens when we are seeing Caleb get the ball out of his hands quickly? Because from my eye test, that seems to be kind of the problem. So dude, Superman, once the play breaks down, it's those quick hitting plays. And sure enough, like we are looking at the league's second worst passing game in yards per attempt and EPA per dropback when he's forced to get the ball out quick, which again is making up nearly a quarter of their pass attempts on the season. So hopefully, Kendall, they can just figure out some of these, hit their screens a little bit better, hit their early progressions better, because if they can start getting that going, look out, because we do know this offense is filled with talent. So we'll see. Again, one of the more exciting games of the week. Love seeing those game totals north of 50, just like we have in our next matchup, Kendall. The Cowboys traveling to Mile High to take on the Denver Broncos. Broncos sitting pretty as 3.5-point home favorites. Again, a 50.5-point game total. So, hey, 2 best offenses in the NFL, Kendall, okay? The Dallas Cowboys and whoever's playing the Dallas Cowboys.
Literally. That's it. Like I was looking at our show sheet and I should have just said I did say play everyone you can. Like that's really my takeaway for this game, because you're just sitting around there. We pick on the Cowboys so much, but it's warranted, Ian. Like we're just always going to pick on him, just like we pick on the Dolphins defense, and we're going to do that here in a little bit again. So that's really my takeaway is you're starting as many as you can. I even like it all the way down to Troy Franklin, who I'll talk about here in a second, but I just want to give, Bo Nix his flowers for the week and just say this is a really smash matchup for him and any quarterback going up against them, because the Cowboys are number 1 in most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. They're sitting at 25.5 is the average per game. And then you just go down the list, Ian. Like we can have a checklist if you want. Quarterback fantasy points per game allowed, they're giving up the most. Running back fantasy points per game allowed, they're giving up the 3rd most at 27. And then wide receiver fantasy points allowed per game is sitting at the 2nd most. So pick whoever you want in this spot and just play him. I think Bo Nix too, like you look at, some of the injury situations that they're going into with this game as well. That's why I want to highlight Troy Franklin in this one. But yeah, the Broncos are looking at this game. They're at home in this one. Matthew Friedman does a great write-up on his, Friedman's favorites for the week. And he likes them at home in this one in the betting markets, just because they're also playing on grass. They're playing outside. So Dallas is going to be a little bit uncomfortable in this one. And so I'm looking at Bo Nix too, Ian, and it was impressive, like scoring 35.56 fantasy points just in the 4th quarter. It was the most by any quarterback in any quarter since at least 2000, according to True Media. I would like to see him just do a little bit. I'd want to see him do a little bit more. I think he gives us high highs, but some of the lows, like we don't love 17 fantasy points, 15 from when we got him. And he, among all quarterbacks with at least 1 start, has faced the least amount of pressure this season. So that helps a lot, but I expect him to do more with something that when you have a stat like that. So again, you still are starting Bo Nix in this one. Troy Franklin, I really like him in this situation too, going up against the Cowboys, who could be without a couple of their starters in this one as well when we're looking at the defensive side. So yeah, I like Troy Franklin. You're obviously starting Cortland Sutton, J.K. Dobbins, Bo Nix. Just start everyone up that you can, because this is a really good week for them.
Bo Nix did pop out as the single biggest discrepancy when I was trying to see, okay, like where are these quarterbacks rank in real life stats, QBR, EPA and things like that versus fantasy points. So again, amazing comeback last week. Hit some really big time throws against the Eagles in that comeback as well, and had a nice game against the Bengals. So hopefully he starts to put it together more. It just hasn't been a complete, second season that maybe we were hoping for from Mr. Nix so far. I want to give a shout out to the Cowboys. Look, we know the passing game, Dak, CD, and Pickens doing their thing, but Javonte Williams, guys, right now looking a lot like the best late round running back in all of fantasy football. It really has been a nice year for these boring veteran running backs that everyone just expecting to get bypassed by their team's day 3 rookies. But lo and behold, Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, and Travis Etienne largely emerging as very great picks at cost. So I know we're in week 8, but we're also in week 8, guys. We're halfway through the season at this point. At some point, we got to give these dudes their flowers. And guys, RB31 ADP for Javonte Williams before the season, RB7 in PPR points per game right now. That is a plus 23 difference, the highest of any top 36 running back. So I'm not trying to crap on all the rookies over here. Quinshad Judkins, Cam Scatterboo are actually 2 and 3 in that metric. So yes, plenty of rookies have emerged as well. But I just think, Kendall, like if Javonte Williams was named Jaden Blue and he was a rookie right now, people would be losing their minds over this start. But I feel like everyone's just so annoyed that they didn't draft more Javonte Williams that we're largely just kind of trying to brush this aside. But end of the day, on pace for over 1,600 yards, 17 touchdowns, the bell cow of a really good Cowboys offense. I'm not expecting Javonte Williams to slow down. Dwayne and I were even talking on Sunday night. He's our consensus RB9 right now. But again, I feel like with kind of a different just mind wave about the guy from the beginning, he'd probably be more like a top 5 RB. So feeling good about it, particularly against the Broncos defense that is really good everywhere, but obviously more so worried about that pass D. So feel good about Javonte. He is right behind Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry in our ranks. What a time to be alive. Let's talk about some Monday Night Football, Kendall. We got the Washington Commanders traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. We do not know if Taylor Swift will be in attendance, but I'm sure we'll find out very quickly into the game. Kansas City sitting pretty as 12.5-point faves. Game total down to 47 because we will have Marcus Mariota under center instead of Jaden Daniels. That said, as much as I would love to see Jaden Daniels out there for the Washington Commanders, Kendall, should still be a pretty fun game because the Chiefs look like the Chiefs again.
It is so exciting. Well, probably not for like everyone because everyone hates the Chiefs and the dynasty talk. It's like talking about the Dodgers right now, but we're excited about it for fantasy football because they're putting up fantasy points for us. And I think that's the most important. One of my favorite conversations that we've been having on between you and I, Sirius XM, wherever it may be, is Patrick Mahomes and the pace that he's on right now. And for me, when I look at this game and just the overall rest of season for Patrick Mahomes, I think with Rashee Rice back, he really does have a chance to finish as the overall QB1 in fantasy football because not only do you have just a bevy of weapons at your disposal, but you have really good ones that you haven't seen on the field at the same time together. It's been Hollywood Brown banged up, it's been Xavier Worthy, and then obviously Rashee Rice not only banged up, but then having the suspension. So for me, when I look at this, Ian, of course, you're starting Rashee Rice, you're starting Xavier Worthy in this. The Commanders are allowing the 4th highest fantasy boost to wide receivers at 4.3 right now. But to me, when I look at this with Patrick Mahomes back, I mean, he is not only just slinging it through the air, right? They're getting that explosiveness back that we talked about in the offseason, where it was like, how do they get this explosiveness back? What do they need? So having the full weapons is going to help here. But Mahomes rushing is really interesting here too, because now not only our defense is going to have to look and say, well, we have to put a lot, we have to not only adjust for the scrambling for Mahomes, we also have to now adjust for Rashee Rice and any additional attention paid to trying to keep Mahomes, in the pocket, keep him in check, is going to cause coverage weakness. So I think with all these weapons back right now, with Rashee Rice looking the way that he is, and I think there's going to be even bigger days ahead for him, that this is really just going to lead to Patrick Mahomes still giving you really, really good fantasy days. And you could have drafted him right now, Ian, on every single one of your teams, and it probably wouldn't be enough. I'm jealous of anyone that has him in 1 or 2 leagues right now. So I like Patrick Mahomes in this one. Obviously, you're starting him everywhere that you can, but the rushing is really the thing that's been sticking out to me over these first 7 weeks of the season.
I will say, I feel like a lot of people in the fantasy community are being like, oh, I was told that, drafting Rashee Rice in round 6, wasn't a good idea and stuff. And guess what? If you have Rashee Rice, you're feeling great right now. But
Yes.
did you see the tweet from Yahoo Fantasy, Kendall, about the teams and their records that drafted Rashee Rice?
No.
It's like 68% of them, or 68, I think, percent of the teams that drafted Rashee Rice were 2-4 or worse going into last week. And like 16% were 4-2 or better. So again, if you threaded that needle, first or last mindset, like that's fantastic. But again, I just don't want to act like that, it's a shut in case, situation. We all knew Rashee Rice was going to be good once he's out there, but as much as we are trying to play for December, winning games in September and October also pretty important. But again, just moral of the story for me is how good this Chiefs offense is. Kendall, this year they've scored 28 plus points in 4 straight games. That's as many as they had last year in the regular season total. They only had 3 in 2023. Very good stuff to see from the Chiefs again. Now moving on to the Commanders, guys. Again, Mariota under center, and don't look now, he's been pretty freaking been nicey in his spot starts over these last 2 years. Only 2 official starts, but he had 2 extended appearances in 2024 where Daniels was basically injured or out of the game very early. And in those games, Mariota has finished as the fantasy QB9, QB6, QB6, and QB19. He's averaged 37.5 rushing yards per game in those instances. Guys, that only trails Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and Anthony Richardson over the past 2 seasons. So even at 30 plus years old, Mariota can still scoot out there. Look, I'm not saying that this is a smash spot for Mariota. Again, going into Arrowhead, this is a Chiefs defense that gets a lot of pressure and is playing some good ball. I feel a lot better if we can get Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel back out there for Mariota. But again, even if not, it is tough to move him too far down those fantasy ranks. So he's coming in right now as our consensus QB 17. That is ahead of CJ Stroud, ahead of Spencer Rattler, Mac Jones, and Carson Wentz. Still behind guys like Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, Jordan Love, and Jackson Dart. But so far, so good for Mariota when he's been forced to step in. Again, situation where I'm sure he's made himself a lot of money with these performances over the past 2 years. Probably going to be a backup for many more to come. Guys, before we keep on moving on, I do want to invite you to go ahead and check out a very free deal from Fantasy Life. That's right. You can get Fantasy Life Plus for free for the next year. All you have to do is go to fantasylife.com/comment, download the comment browser by Perplexity, and you will get, again, a full year of Fantasy Life Plus for free. So you can find all the info in the description if you're checking us out on YouTube, or go ahead again, just check out fantasylife.com/comment on your web browser and go ahead and get that free sub for an entire year. We will not be offering a better deal. Let's talk about the Titans traveling to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. We got the Colts sitting as 14-point favorites, Kendall. Game total resting here at 47. So, again, not quite the same as Denver where it's like play everyone involved, but, man, pretty close.
Yeah, you're pretty close. And like we said this before, Ian, it's Buymageddon week. You're going to hear us. This is the last, well, it's not the last time we're going to say Buymageddon. You're going to hear it probably 100 more times until Sunday. But I will say, if you're in need of a flex play, Alec Pierce is the guy that you can go and get. Maybe some people, and I've seen him available on some waivers here, but he had 31% of the targets last week, 71% of the air yards, and a 24.4 ADOT, average depth of target when we're talking about ADOT there. So I think he's a really good flex play, especially if someone's missing, one Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua. The list goes on for the good receivers that are going to be out this week. So yeah, Alec Pierce, like you're going to know when Daniel Jones is going back there and he's loading things up, he's probably looking downfield for Alec Pierce. And I know this can give you boom or bust mentality. But again, he is the only one that's really kind of getting this role. All the other guys are really getting those short passes that you're going to see down the middle. It's Warren, it's Pittman, it's Josh Downs. So for this, they're fighting for the short targets, but the role that Alec Pierce is going to get in this one. He's actually averaged 9.5 PPR points per game, which if we're talking about guys you're just picking up off waivers, I think is a really good mark that not a lot of other receivers are going to clear. And so far, Ian, this team has been one where we've said to ourselves, man, we really need someone off this Colts team. If you would have told me that like 5 months ago, I would have been like, yeah, I don't believe you on that one. But it really is. They look good. And so I think Pierce is definitely someone that you can go ahead and pick up for this week and save him. Don't drop him just yet because he's a really good flex play for week 8.
Love this shout and my 10 things article, which you guys can find for free at fantasylife.com. One of my bold predictions is Alec Pierce going off in this spot. Only the Cowboys have actually been worse on deep balls to wide receivers than the Titans this year in terms of yards per attempt and EPA. So new Gen Z white lightning. Come on, Alec Pierce, get that job done. Meanwhile, with the Titans, look, do not start any Tennessee Titans if you guys can at all help it. But I did want to just take a brief second and try to contextualize Cam Ward's rookie season through 7 starts. Okay, so we have seen since the year 2000, 116 quarterbacks, again, have at least 7 starts in their rookie season. And yeah, so his ranking among those guys, yards per attempt, he's 90th, completion rate 69th, nice touchdown rate 104th, passer rating 76, and the sack rate, which is probably the biggest problem, Kendall, 108th among 116 qualified quarterbacks. I'm just saying, guys, you see him very down near the bottom next to guys like Bryce Young, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Zach Wilson, even more. So obviously a supporting cast doing him no favors, but this dude is now on pace to take 73 sacks. That would be the second most in NFL history behind only 2002 David Carr. So on the one hand, no, the offensive line isn't exactly helping, but on the other hand, guys, we do have another stat called pressure to sack rate. How often are quarterbacks actually taking sacks when they're pressured? And nobody has taken more in those instances than Cam Ward. So not good. Would be a lot cooler if we got Calvin Ridley out there, but he's still not practicing with a hamstring. Just a sad and unfortunately likely wasted year for the number 1 overall overall pick. Let's move on to more optimism here, Kendall, because we got an NFC South showdown. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to New Orleans to take on the Fighting Cooter Doodles. We got Tampa Bay sitting pretty as 4.5-point favorites. The game totals out 46.5. So you got the Saints here, Kendall. Again, a situation where I
Yeah.
think they've been more feisty and competitive than a lot of people thought. That said, the one constant in New Orleans over the years has been Alvin Kamara putting up a ton of fantasy points. But unfortunately, that really hasn't been the case in 2025. Do you expect that to start changing here on Sunday?
I would hope so for one of my teams. And yeah, you said it. I'm not necessarily picking the Saints and Survivor anytime soon, but I will say that with this unfortunate Kendre Miller injury, which just absolutely stinks because we told everyone watching for like the last 6 weeks to go and pick him up, but he is going to be out for the rest of the season. I do expect Devin Neal to get some work in this offense, but we really just have to turn back to Alvin Kamara and maybe look at him getting a bigger role because of this. He had 69% of the rush attempts, 85% snap share in week 7. And again, if you look back at weeks 1, 2, and 7, where Miller was just basically a non-factor for the Saints, Kamara had an average utilization score of 76. Shout out to Dwayne McFarland for that. You can find that article at fantasylife.com 100% free. But I know that people are really frustrated with him, and I am too, because what we always looked at with Alvin Kamara in the spots that we were taking him was that he was going to get the passing work. He was going to be someone that was always going to receive targets. And we haven't seen that. And targets went back in the direction of Juwan Johnson when Miller was injured. And that's a trend we saw over the first few games as well. So I think on this one, though, historically, going back to Dwayne's article, he said that his comps, when we're looking at Alvin Kamara, have averaged 14.7 fantasy points. And some of them, 94% of them, finished the season inside the top 24 running backs. So I know that Kamara's talking about not being traded. He wants to go sip pina coladas if he's traded. But please, Alvin Kamara, just for our fantasy teams and our sanity. I'm just hoping that he's still going to get some of the most of the work on the ground there. I don't know if a lot's going to change in the passing game necessarily. This is a tough team to get into the red zone too, but I do think he upgrades more of, to me, in my rankings this week, he's going to be a low end RB2, which is a bit better than what we saw with the split between him and Kendre Miller over the past few weeks for sure.
1-for-1 trades done for Kamara on Yahoo today. Quentin Johnston, J.K. Dobbins, Michael Pittman. I
Ooh.
think I like the Kamara side in all those, Kendall.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. I need to call my league mates up because, yeah, I need some running back help this weekend. It's brutal.
Now over at Tampa Bay, again, mentioned in our opening that Mike Evans will be missing at least seemingly the next 8 weeks with that collarbone. So next man up, it does seem like pint-sized speedster Tez Johnson will be that guy, pal. So looking at Tez, I mean, team high 77% route rate over these past 2 weeks. So it's not like he's being forced into his gadgety role. They're letting him be just a normal, regular wide receiver, which is great to see because the dude is a baller, okay? So he can take the top off the defense, as we saw with that MVP-esque throw from Baker Mayfield 2 weeks ago. And even that screen touchdown he had last week, hilarious hearing him say, in an interview this week that he basically just smashed all the buttons on his controller. And we saw that hitting the hurdle and the spin move and finding his way into the end zone. So I do think Tez just seems like he's someone that can get open at will. Probably could have had another touchdown on Monday night with a bit better pass from Baker. That said, I get it. It's kind of like when Stafford misses Tutu Atwell downfield. It's tough to be too mad because you're throwing to a guy who's like 5'4" and weighs 150 pounds. So again, not trying to put too much, slander here on Baker or anything, but end of the day, we're looking at Tez Johnson as the likely number 2, as long as Godwin and Mike Evans are going to be out, which honestly is seeming like more so than not the rest of the season. So, of course, Ibuka is number 1, but at this point, Kendall, we do have Tez Johnson all the way up there as our consensus wide receiver 42. So, again, not like someone who needs to be forced into your lineup, but it's a winnable enough matchup. He is ranked ahead of guys like Alec A. Manor, his teammate Sterling Shepard, Darnell Mooney, and Xavier Legette, still behind guys like Keon Coleman, Troy Franklin, and Marvin Mims. But I'm going to have to get some answers from Mr. Matthew Friedman because, again, you guys can see each of our respective ranks. He's got the Tasmanian Devil all the way down there at wide receiver 53. So would be even higher in the consensus ranks if it wasn't for Mr. Wet Blanket. We'll see if Friedman comes to his senses a bit more as the week goes on. We are going on to the Bills traveling to Carolina to take on the Panthers. Buffalo fresh off their bye, sitting at 7.5-point road favorites. The game total down to 46. So Kendall, looking at the Panthers again, should probably be Andy Dalton under center, but let's face it, the biggest worry and just concern in this Panthers organization, at least in fantasy land over the past 2 weeks, has been what to make of this backfield.
Yeah, I hate it actually. And it's the worst when you have Dwayne McFarland coming on and saying that this backfield now reminds him of the Seahawks right now. So Trust is a really tough word when we're talking about Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard. And they've come out and they've both said, like, hey, we're okay in this committee because we're winning football games. So for us in fantasy, it's not necessarily great. They both saw plenty of work, I think, in week 7. But I'm looking at Buffalo and I'm just saying to myself, okay, the Buffalo Bills right now rank next to last in fantasy points per game allowed on planned rush plays over the past 4 weeks. That is per the Athletic. But this Bills team is coming out of their bye, and they're also going to be an angry team that wants to win and needs to win. They're not in a bad of a place as the Ravens right now, but this, again, I think they're going to really come out hot. I'm finding a place for Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard in my lineups because, again, with 6 teams on a bye, it's really hard to get them out of some of my flex spots. But I'm looking at this and I'm really hoping, Chuba Hubbard had 54% of the snaps. Dowdle had 46% because we can't have anything nice. If it does start to get into a hot hand situation, that's where we have to pay attention. Like if Rico Dowdle starts to really run away with things, that's where this can be a really big difference from the Seahawks backfield. Charbonnet had those touchdowns last week, but he has not been running away with that spot. And that's why it's so frustrating why they're not featuring Kenneth Walker there. So if Rico Dowdle, I feel like if Dave Canales sees Rico Dowdle really be the guy that's coming on strong, they're going to switch, but we haven't seen it yet. So that's why I'm okay this week putting them in lineups if I need to. Again, trust is a really strong word, so I wouldn't say trust. I would say hopefully, like crossing my fingers, closing my eyes, not watching the game and hoping I get fantasy points out of them. That's what I would say.
Consensus ranks Rico Dowdle RB21, Chuba Hubbard RB27. Hey, banged up Bills
Yeah.
front 7 have allowed the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs this year. Could be healthier coming out of the bye. I don't love the game script potential here to go south in a hurry, but I'm with you. Not very likely that fantasy managers have too many better choices. Over at the Bills, guys, we are going to play a fun game. It's time for the Vanna Cream Trust-O-Meter. We are ranking the Bills pass catchers on the Vanna Cream Trust-O-Meter. How much do we trust each of these guys on a scale from 1 to 10? Not going to lie, Kendall, these are not going to be very high trust rankings. I will say with Josh Palmer not practicing out of the bye, we could be looking at a little bit more condensed targets for Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakur. Tyrell Shavers will be the next man up. But man, on the season, it's already been a situation where Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakur lead the way with 35 and 34 targets respectively. They both put up good, definitely not great wide receiver 4 fantasy numbers. But then we got Dalton Kincaid at 24. He's missed a game. Josh Palmer at 20. The running backs get involved as well. And again, Dawson Knox will not go away. So honestly, Kendall, I think the person I trust most here is Dalton Kincaid. He actually is the tight end 5 in PPR points per game. Need to see about this oblique injury, but man, he's averaging 12 yards per target this year. That's the best number among tight ends. He was only at 6 last year. He's got the best passer rating when targeted among tight ends, and his catch rate at 83%, far better than anything we've seen. So again, is Dalton Kincaid in like our legit circle of trust, the Tyler Warrens, the Jake Ferguson of the world? No, but still, relative to most tight ends, we don't exactly love them either. I would give, Dalton Kincaid a quality 6 out of 10, the trust-o-meter. How about you?
Okay. Yeah, 6 out of 10 sounds nice. I'll give it, you know what, Ian? I'll give him one more boost up, and I'll say 7 actually because it is National Tight Ends Day on Sunday. So I don't know if that changes your mind, if you're a narrative-driven kind of guy, like the birthdays or whatever it could be. But I'll say that, yeah, in a week where it is National Tight Ends Day, all jokes aside, I do like Kincaid just because of everything that you said. I think he's going to return to form more out of this bye, like we've said. So it's time for teams to really sit down and get serious, and I think the Bills are going to be angry. And so I really like the spot that he's in. So I'll give him a 7 and a touchdown. Let's say a touchdown for National Tight Ends Day.
I cannot wait to put together my just ill-advised 10-leg anytime
Right.
touchdown parlay with nothing but tight ends this Sunday. And hey, in this case, it might actually work. Panthers are dead last in DVOA against the position. So 6 out of 10 for Mr. Kincaid. Unfortunately for Keon Coleman, one of my favorite picks of the preseason. Tough to have him over a 3 out of 10. Khalil Shakur a little bit better. I'll go ahead and give him a 4 out of 10 just because of his ability after the catch. But hey, if we do see Josh Palmer out, maybe we can get some more downfield opportunities for Keon Coleman. Again, if we would have known that in week 8, Kendall, Keon Coleman would be leading the Bills in total targets, I think people would have been lining up to draft him a bit more. We know the dude's got some talent there. Hopefully a second half boom could be on the way. But hey, guys, again, shout out to Vanna Cream. They actually give guys a no-nonsense, fragrance-free care designed for sensitive skin because even guys need a little help. Again, shout out to our friends over at Vanna Cream. Let's move on, Kendall. We have the Dolphins facing the Falcons in Atlanta here. Falcons sitting at 7-point home favorites. Honestly, maybe doesn't seem high enough against this dumpster fire of a a team that the Dolphins have become. Game total resting here at 45. So speaking of those Falcons, goodness gracious, Kendall. Again, always love talking about the scenario. Aliens invade the planet. We got a field of football team, defend the human race and all civilization. I'm taking Bijan Robinson as an RB1.
Bijan Robinson every single day. Congratulations to anyone that has Bijan Robinson. We're super jealous of you. I am. I know. I only have him in one league, and I should have had him. I should have him more places, but I don't, Ian. So it's fine. Yeah, the Dolphins are an absolute dumpster fire, and they're just a weird team that we're always going to pick on. So I think for Bijan Robinson, again, you don't need us to sit here and tell you that he's going to be a cheat code and you need to start him everywhere, but you do. I'm thinking 2 touchdowns in this one, Ian. I mean, the Dolphins are allowing 26.8 PPR fantasy points per game to running backs in the year 2025. So I like Bijan. And I also, on the other side, really like Tyler Algier in this spot, because if you're looking for a flex option and maybe someone, he shouldn't be on waivers, especially if you're in one of those deeper leagues, he's not going to be out there. But if for whatever reason someone looked around and they needed to drop someone or they made a mistake, Tyler Algier should be someone that you go and get, because we know Bijan Robinson's going to get his. But I think on the other side of that, because of just how bad the Dolphins have been, you could see some really good yardage, some really good usage, some really good numbers for someone like Tyler Algier, because again, they've given up a league high 898 rushing yards to running backs this season. And I think Algier, he's averaging 9.5 carries per game this season. He's in line for a really good flex spot. So if you're looking around and you're saying, man, I'm having a little bit of trouble, Tyler Algier is another one that's going to benefit from this matchup.
Like that shout. Always just a great handcuff to have, period. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely nice flex potential this week. Speaking of that horrible Dolphins team, as Kendall was saying, Devon Achane, guys, has been the one diamond in this pile of trash this year. But I do wonder if for the right price, which better be high, maybe it is time to get out ahead of what seems like an inevitable midseason coach firing and potential benching going from Tua Tagovailoa to either Quinn Ewers or obviously Zach Wilson on the bench. So look, Achane's the man. He's ripped off 40+ yard runs over the past 2 weeks. Like, he still looks great, but the passing game, really his production has slowed to a halt there. We're talking about since week 3, guys, only 99 receiving yards on 29 targets, very un-Achane-like. And just again, at this point, trying to get ahead of a team that literally could be the worst offense in the league during the second half of the year. If you can flip Achane for a similar RB1 level player, like maybe a Derrick Henry, or God forbid, a wide receiver one. I did actually see 2 trades go through on Yahoo, where it's Achane for JSN and then Emeka Ibuka straight up. I get it. I don't know why someone would trade JSN for Achane, but maybe you could be that lucky person to take advantage of it. Also saw a trade that was Achane and Xavier Worthy for Saquon Barkley and AJ Brown. So they're out there. Please, for the love of God, don't, give the dude away or anything like that. But just a situation where, again, as great as he has been, RB6 and PPR points per game, we've seen what just, dumpster fire offenses can do to a great fantasy running back. I hope Achane is not next. Would love to be wrong on this one, Kendall. But again, certainly don't think the Dolphins are trending up at this point in the season. Let's go ahead and move on to some Jets at the Bengals. We got a Joe Flacco revenge game brewing here, since he's sitting pretty at 6.5-point home favorites. Game total of 44.5. So speaking of old man Flacco, Kendall, he has made the Bengals fun to watch again. And for that, we thank him.
Yeah, we do thank him, and we say, hey, if you need a any kind of streamer this week, I think Joe Flacco is definitely going to be one that you can turn to, because he has averaged 22.37 fantasy points per game since joining the Bengals. And I think a lot of that, Ian, I was even asked earlier today on a hit over with VSiN, like, should we trust Joe Flacco? And again, trust is a really tough word. I don't think it's going to be the icy hot bowl every single week with Flacco, but I do look around and I say, I think we can trust the weapons around him. And that's what makes a huge difference here for Flacco. He's not throwing to just a guy anymore or anything like that. You've got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins on the other side. Chase Brown had a great game in that Thursday night one as well. So I think because of that and the weapons that he has at his disposal, yeah, we can trust him, especially when you're going up against this team. So Jamar Chase had the perfect 100 utilization score at fantasylife.com. And you're just really happy with that. And T. Higgins also. T. Higgins was borderline not startable for some people, especially if they were in the shallow formats. They probably just benched him. But now you look at T. Higgins and you can tell yourself, all right, well, I can definitely start him with Joe Flacco in there. He's got good historical comps from Dwayne McFarland. They've averaged 15 points, 78% of them notching a top 24 finish for the season. So I like Joe Flacco in this one. I think if, again, you need someone to go out there and just stream this week, Joe Flacco is going to be your guy.
With you on that one because again, why not just start everyone you can against the Jets? Lord
Why
knows we aren't
not?
trying to start anyone on the Jets, though. That is the big catch here. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, Brees Hall is fine, but he is a little bit banged up himself, and also, has been in quite a few trade rumors. It does sound like Garrett Wilson could be a week away still. I do believe the Jets have a week 9 bye there. So honestly, guys, the one Jet I do want to actually try to pick up and make a habit, not of starting, but at least having on my bench, is Isaiah Davis right now because again, Brees Hall already banged up, and also again has been a part of those aforementioned trade rumors. And with Isaiah Davis, I mean, this is a 6'1", 220-pound running back with pass catching ability on an offense that literally has not given another running back a single touch this season, other than Braylon Allen, who's not going to be back until early December at the absolute earliest at this point. So Isaiah Davis, again, he would be on the cover of all these waiver wires the second that Brees Hall gets traded. So why not try to get ahead of it and get him stashed on your bench right now? Again, flex play in deeper leagues this week, I can get it. The Bengals are actually the worst defense in the league in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to opposing running backs. But more than anything, just think this is a situation similar to what we hyped up with Kendre Miller with over the last month or so, Kendall, where, we
Yeah.
have the injury handcuff upside, but also the potential for a trade. Obviously, a little bit more realistic with Brees Hall than Kamara at this point. Let's talk some Sunday night football. We got another revenge game special. The Green Bay Packers traveling to Pittsburgh to take on Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Green Bay sitting as 3-point favorites on the road. Game total of 44.5. So looking at those Steelers, Kendall, again, passing game has largely been doing good, efficient things. The run game wasn't getting going until all of a sudden it was last week. Shout out Jalen Warren. Dude has really made the most out of his opportunities all season long.
Yeah, and we hope it continues this week. Again, this is a tough Packers defense when we're looking at them against running backs. Fourth least fantasy points per game given to running backs this season. The fantasy boost isn't there either. But you were really excited if you had Jalen Warren. If you have Jalen Warren, you got a little bit nervous, right? Kenneth Gainwell in that international game looked really good, and then Jalen Warren was banged up, wasn't able to play in that one. Then they went on their bye. But what we saw last week is what we really wanted to see him back to. He finished that game 67% snap share. He had 49% route participation rate, 84% rush share. So again, if you have him, I have him in places, Ian. I'm playing him again. You have to lower a little bit, I think, your expectations because of this Packers defense. They haven't allowed any player to pile up more than 100 rushing yards in a game this season. They've given up at least one rushing touchdown to 3 players this season, but that's not a lot there. So I think Jalen Warren, you're excited about the role that you saw in week 7, and you hope that continues. But again, against this Packers team, just lower expectations a little bit, but he's still going to be a player when I put my rankings in that he's startable. You're going to start him.
Absolutely. So again, really was a big boom last week, but that kind of tends to happen against the Bengals. So maybe check those
Amen.
expectations a little bit. But hey, still a nice season overall. Speaking of those Packers, hey, want to talk about some of these wide receivers because so far, guys, Romeo Dobbs has actually been the one that we really can trust and get behind. Has a team high 36 targets this year. Second place is Tucker Kraft with 32, and Matthew Golden, everyone's favorite first round wide receiver rookie, only sitting there at 23. Dobbs obviously had the great 3-touchdown game against the Cowboys, but even in 2 weeks since then, still has managed to earn 8+ targets in each, much to the chagrin of longtime Romeo Dobbs hater Dwayne McFarland. But all Drake and joshing aside, the wide receiver 28 in PPR points per game, guys, that is ahead of Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Lab McConkey, and A.J. Brown. And I do think that in this spot against the Steelers defense that, as we saw last Thursday night and really throughout the season, has not been their usual juggernaut sells, particularly in the cornerback room and in the secondary. So maybe Jalen Ramsey does decide to follow around Romeo Dobbs. That would not be ideal, but he hasn't made a huge habit of doing that this year. Also, a lot of man coverage being played out of those Steelers, something that I do expect Dobbs to be able to take advantage of. So in our consensus ranks, guys, the wide receiver 26 on the week, that is ahead of Khalil Shakur, DJ Moore, Rashid Shaheed, and the 49ers wide receivers. Not getting too crazy, okay? He's still behind Wan'Dale Robinson, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Addison, the Chargers wide receivers, but so far, so good for Romeo Dobbs. I would not expect a returning Christian Watson to be taking anything away from Dobbs. If anything, I think he probably just slides into Dontavian Wick's starting spot. Let's talk about an NFC East matchup, Kendall. We got the New York Football Giants traveling to Philly to take on the Eagles. Again, a matchup that happened just 2 short weeks ago. Eagles, despite the result of their last game, sitting as 7-point home favorites. This game total, though, at a lowly 43.5. So looking at those Eagles, the pass game has woken up, Kendall. That's great.
Yeah.
The run game in Saquon Barkley, not so much. We're still waiting.
Ian, what are we doing? Will it ever? That's my question for this game, and I know I'm supposed to answer that, but I don't know, Ian. I'm sitting here looking at all the stats and I'm saying, woof, this has not been a good season for Saquon Barkley. You know, at this point in the season that he is not going to pay off his ADP. He has not had a 60 plus rushing yard game since week 2. He's averaged just 10.3 fantasy points over the last 5 weeks. I will say, there might be light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not talking about it in week 8. I hope he is able to, play well in this one. But I will say, starting in week 12, the Eagles have the second best schedule for running backs. So if it doesn't happen this week, you can at least tell yourself, whatever that is, 4 weeks from now, that maybe it's going to get better. Ian, I can't believe the stats that we're looking at with Saquon Barkley. When we talk about stats with Saquon Barkley, we have to talk about the offensive line as well. And I understand that. But out of 24 running backs who have at least 75 carries so far this season, he ranks dead last in yards per carry, sitting at 3.3. Last year, he averaged 5.8 yards per carry. We talk about the 125.3 yards per game last season. This year, he's running for 52.7 yards per game. It's just a different Barkley this season, unfortunately, in fantasy football. I still think you're going to have boom games, but at least it came together in the passing game. That doesn't help anyone with Saquon Barkley right now. But I am going to say, yes, this could be at least a nicer game for him in the revenge tour. But I think we just right now, Ian, we just have to lower expectations. This isn't going to be the Saquon from 2024, unfortunately. We have a new version of 2025 Saquon Barkley, and that includes him being on pace to rush for 896 yards in 17 games. That's way off from the 2005 that we got last year.
I tend to think that he is too good to go much longer, but man, you mentioned
Yeah.
again that yards per carry stat in particular, rough stuff indeed. I will say I do think those offensive line injuries and performance is the main culprit here. Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, kind of been in and out of the lineup, but unfortunately, not exactly getting better, guys. Their center Cam Jurgens not practicing to start this week as he deals with a knee injury. Over with those Giants guys, obviously, again, saw what Scadaboo did against these Eagles a couple weeks ago. Wandale Robinson as well. I do think both those guys should be in more lineups than not, but how about Jackson Dart and everything he has done? The QB4 in fantasy points per game since he took over under center, thanks in large part to him averaging a position high 9 fantasy points per start from purely rushing production. So again, wish the dude would take a little bit better care of himself, maybe hanging out with Cam Scadaboo a little bit too much with the way he's taking these hits in the open field, but just hard not to be incredibly impressed by Dart, especially considering what we've seen other quarterbacks do in this system. And despite the fact that he hasn't had Malik Neighbors or even obviously to a way less degree, Darius Slayton over these past few weeks. So great stuff from Jackson Dart. Going to be tougher this time around, presumably with a healthier, Jalen Carter out on the field for the Eagles. But still, guys, Jackson Dart, our consensus QB 12, that is ahead of Jordan Love, Joe Flacco, Aaron Rodgers, behind Caleb Williams, Bo Nix in that great matchup, Daniel Jones himself in another great matchup. But if you guys did manage to scoop up Dart on the waiver wire, you were feeling pretty good about that right now. 2 more matchups to get through here on the Fantasy Live Show. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We got the 49ers traveling to Houston to take on the Texans. Texans are sitting as 1-point favorites, game total of 41.5. So unfortunately, Kendall, it's just a situation in Houston where they really haven't looked good all year outside of playing the banged up Ravens again to face, the dog crap Titans, let's face it. And now it's a situation where they came out of the bye, hopefully healthier, but no longer because their entire wide receiver room is hurt. So what are you expecting out of CJ Stroud and company in this spot?
Yeah, this sucks. I mean, it just really sucks. Nico Collins, for that being a Monday night game, that's why we're worried that he's not going to be able to play this weekend, because it's a Monday night. He has to go through the whole concussion protocol. So you have to keep an eye on him. And then Christian Kirk doesn't look like he's going to be in on this one either. So the big question is, which wide receiver do you go to? I recommended both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel in the fantasy write-up for the waivers. But I will say Jaden Higgins is more rostered than anyone. But I think that's okay, because I'm actually going with Jalen Noel here, Ian. And this might be one where he's available on waivers. He had 4 catches for 77 yards, 7 targets going up against Seattle. Prior to that, he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't on anyone's radar, really. I had to drop him in a few leagues a couple weeks ago because I just couldn't wait. And like you said, a lot of it too, it's not just him, but it is the Texans offense, I should say, excuse me. I mean, CJ Stroud is just bad. He's got a 91.1 QB rating. That's the 17th best mark in the NFL right now. But I'm looking at Jalen Noel and I'm saying to myself, I think in this matchup, Higgins sometimes makes sense to people because he is more of that red zone threat. But I think they're going to be trailing in this matchup. And I'm actually looking to Noel to steal a little bit of those short passes, kind of get a little bit more work in there. So I'm actually going to go with him in this one. And then I do want to shout out, it's National Tight End Day week, whatever it is. So shout out to Dalton Schultz too. I do think he gets a bit of a bump here as well with potentially Nico Collins being out.
I was actually shocked how well this 49ers defense held up against the Falcons, again, without Fred Warner,
Yeah.
without Nick Bosa. So maybe that's a sign of things to come, or maybe they look a little bit more like they did against the Buccaneers. Coverage breakdowns all over the place. Certainly will be good news for Noel Higgins and even, yes, Dalton Schultz if that were to happen. With the 49ers, guys, we know it's Christian McCaffrey and pretty much everyone else at this point. The wide receivers with no Ricky Pearsall are both in that wide receiver 3 range, and we are expecting Mac Jones to likely once again be under center in place of Brock Purdy. But I want to shout out someone who actually might be hitting your guys' waiver wire due to all the bye weeks. All right. Brian Robinson actually only rostered in about 25% of ESPN and Yahoo leagues alike when I checked earlier this lovely Wednesday afternoon. And it's just a situation where Christian McCaffrey, man, they are not easing or pumping the brakes on this dude at all at this point. He is on pace for 449 touches this year. That would be the most in a single season since DeMarco Murray back in 2014. So, hey, again, we've seen everyone else in San Francisco get hurt. Maybe Christian McCaffrey made that deal with the devil and he will be just fine winning all of his loyal fantasy managers some great championships. But if you do have CMC, guys, I cannot imagine not trying to get Brian Robinson on our bench. He actually has been pretty good making the most out of his opportunities. He has the highest percentage of rushes in the league with at least 3 yards after contact per carry. And no, I wouldn't expect even a fraction of the receiving production that CMC is getting from Brian Robinson. But that said, no other running back has touched the football this year. So maybe we could get a little more than expected. And hey, I think Jordan Mason and Elijah Mitchell were certainly helping a lot of us out when CMC missed time in past years. So Brian Robinson, again, one of the better fantasy handcuffs out there, really would try to stash him if at all possible in the upcoming weeks. Last matchup, Kendall, we saved the worst for last. If you guys haven't noticed, we are going down the game total and getting just, again, the lower scoring matchups here towards the end. And accordingly, we got the Browns traveling to New England to take on the Patriots. New England sitting there as 7-point home favorites. The game total at 40.5. So in New England, Kendall, some fairly big changes with the coaching staff, and they brought in Stephon Diggs. But man, no bigger change than Drake May taking a mega leap and playing like one of the best quarterbacks in football so far in 2025.
Yeah, he looks good, and mind you, I made sure that we weren't talking about Travion Henderson or Ramondre Stevenson here because I
Thank you.
just can't do it anymore, Ian. We are already miserable. We can't talk about them, so I decided to go the nicer route and just say good things about Drake May, which everyone kind of knows here. Drake May is having a phenomenal season. I don't think it's really out of the realm of possibility, and I don't even think it's a hot take to say he is going to be the best quarterback this season from that 2024 class, whether it be injuries, whether it be everything else that's going on. The efficiency, it's just not a one-off for Drake May. And that's been the one thing. He's completed an average of 0.2% of his passes this season, with 2 games going over 80%. His lowest mark of the season came in week 1. We expect a little bit of, getting back into it when it's week 1, but his worst performance is higher than the average of a number of quarterbacks. And that includes Williams, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix. So I'm just looking at this guy and just saying, thank goodness I have him in a few leagues. If you were able to wait on him, he has really been paying off for you, because there's a handful of quarterbacks in the range that others were going where if you waited on Drake May, you were really excited about the production that he's giving you. So I love the performances that he's put up. This will be a tough one. Like you said, you saw the total on the screen there a little bit earlier, but the Browns, they're tough against quarterbacks. They've allowed the 3rd least fantasy points per game. When you look at the running back points per game, it's the 2nd least. Wide receivers, it's the 9th least. Tight ends, you get what I'm saying here, 12th least. So this is going to be a tough game, but this is really just me shouting out Drake May for what he's done so far this season, and let's see if he can keep it up, because again, I didn't want to talk about Travion Henderson. I rage dropped him, Ian. I'll be fine with it. If he goes off this week, it's because I dropped him, and that's why.
Well, we all of us, remaining very, very sad Trayvon Henderson back holders would appreciate your service if that does come to fruition, Kendall. Over with the Browns. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a week, guys, where we could be very, very excited about Harold Fannin. Obviously, had no David Njoku last week, but rare positive leading game script for the Browns, and Mother Nature being a bit of a biatch there did not help things there in Cleveland. But at this point, David Njoku does seem like he is going to return. He was limited in practice with that knee injury. Kevin Stefanski did, I believe, say he is hopeful that he is going to be out there to play this week. So again, a situation where we'll wait and see what happens, but Njoku didn't practice at all last week. He was just limited today to start the week. So you would think that he is on track to play, but Harold Fannin, man, he leads all quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends in terms of missed tackles this season with 17 on only 34 actual touches. So doing, again, a great job with all of his opportunities. And just when you watch this dude play football, he seems to be moving it almost as like a different frequency out there. Very, very athletic and a very tough guard for any safety or linebacker. Unfortunately, tasked with trying to cover the guy. So he's actually all the way up there as my tight end 5 without David Njoku. He's
Ooh.
tight end 8 consensusly. That would be ahead of guys like Oronde Gadsden, Kyle Pitts, Mason Taylor, Mark Andrews, behind guys like Dallas Goedert, Travis Kelce, and Dalton Kincaid. I will say, though, that last group of guys, Goddard, Kelce, and Kincaid, likely would go ahead. I'm sorry, Gadsden, Pitts, Taylor, and Andrews, those are dudes who could actually be moving up ahead of Harold Fannin if we do see Njoku play, which, again, is looking a bit more and more likely. So otherwise, we got Quinshon Judkins, and otherwise, yeah, do not touch these Browns in fantasy. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Fantasy Life Show, everyone. If you like the show, then please like the show. Always help when you hit that subscribe button as well. So appreciate you. Get those lineups right, and best of luck in week 8 and beyond. For Kendall, for producer Matt, for producer Tony, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.